So this is a new idea I had called Gamer Questions, and it came about because I've had a couple of encounters with people recently who talked about JRPGs and said, well, I don't really consider something to be a JRPG if it wasn't developed in Japan. And I thought about it and I said, well, yeah, I suppose JRPG stands for Japanese role-playing game, but does it mean that it's of Japan, or does it mean that it takes into account the Japanese influence on RPGs as we moved from things like Ultima and Wizardry into things like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and beyond? And so my reaction was kind of that of, well, would you consider any RPG that comes from Japan to be a Japanese role-playing game, a JRPG? And according to what I read, people were saying yes. And the reaction was such that they said something like Chrono Trigger, you know, something that was developed for the Super Nintendo and was a prime example of a wonderful RPG of the era, is just as much a JRPG as Dark Souls.
Do you consider both of these games to be JRPGs? If so, I assume that you are following the simple fact that any RPG developed in Japan is a Japanese RPG. If that is not true, and you consider these two games to be of different genres, then what are their genres? Dark Souls would be an action RPG, and Chrono Trigger would be what? And if you deem Chrono Trigger a JRPG while Dark Souls is not, then obviously the of Japan requirement doesn't apply to the genre label JRPG, as both of these games are RPGs and were made in Japan. If you move forward to the late 90s, Final Fantasy VII arrives, and JRPGs receive a surge of interest due to the cinematic storytelling present thanks to the capacity provided by CD-ROM. The surge was noticeable enough that companies decided to crank out more games like Final Fantasy VII. One game that arrived on the PC shortly thereafter was Septerra Core: Legacy of the Creator. This game was developed in the United States by Valkyrie Studios. It has an art style that is arguably influenced by Japan, has turn-based combat, cinematic cutscenes, and the box even quotes Computer Gaming World as saying, quote, "Those who enjoyed Final Fantasy VII or Return to Krondor should look out for Septerra Core." So what is it? Is the subgenre classification defined by certain traits of the game, such as storytelling, characters, art, and game mechanics, or is it purely based on geographic location of where it was developed? Is this a JRPG, Western RPG, or simply an RPG, due to the fact it has Japanese traits but was developed in the West? Another more recent example would be Cosmic Star Heroine. A bit of the same story. Gamers have referred to it as being a nod to the JRPGs that influenced it, such as Phantasy Star and Chrono Trigger.
Yet they say it isn't a JRPG because it wasn't developed in Japan. So what is your take? Have we reached the point where JRPG is antiquated if you refer to it as needing to be from Japan? Should the definition be supplanted by a list of traits that the game should have to have? Let me know. Tell me in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.